Hi, I'm Bill Bradley. Join me for a recent excerpt of American Voices. It's hard enough to sail around the world, but try sailing around without modern technology. My guest today won the Golden Globe race. It's a non-stop, around-the-world race, and you're only allowed to use equipment that was available in 1968. That means no GPS. That means using celestial navigation, and no outside assistance allowed. Kirsten Neuschäfer is the only woman who's ever won this race.
Just left. It's now 7 o'clock, so the start line was 3 hours ago. It was an absolutely amazing feeling to see so many people out there. I'm really glad to be here. I feel really, really blessed by life, by all the friendships, by all the support. And so I don't feel alone out here. All right, what a view. Absolutely spectacular. So the progress is slow, but we're also out here to enjoy the beauty of the ocean. If this isn't beautiful, then I don't know what is.
Kirsten Neuschäfer is here with me now. Wonderful to speak with you.
Thank you. It's so nice to be on your show.
Kirsten, thank you so much. Where are you right now?
I'm on my boat in France, in Le Sable d'Olonne at the moment.
Oh, that's great. So how did you get this idea to enter the race?
I was working on a charter boat down in on a sub-Antarctic island, and a crew member was following the 2018 race, and it sounded like an exciting adventure race, and I started thinking about entering the 2022 edition.
What were you doing in Antarctica on a charter boat?
We had taken some mountaineers down that wanted to do a first ascent on South Georgia. So we went down in September when there was still plenty of snow and some options to ski and, just go to one of those far-off islands.
So you were already an adventurer.
Yes, certainly. I think adventure has been quite a driving force throughout my life as far as I can remember back.
Well, did you always love sailing?
Yes, I always did from the first time I experienced it, which was somewhere in my childhood. And I've always loved the water, whether it's swimming or surfing or windsurfing or, I'm a water baby.
Well, who taught you how to sail?
My father was very keen on sailing when he was much younger, and he not only taught me how to sail, but he also enthused me about the idea of sailing around the world and using sailing as a means to travel.
Oh, really? How did that? Tell me that story. Your father used to tell you stories about sailing around the globe?
Yes, he did. And it came about that he, as a young man, wanted to sail around the world. So he started building himself a boat together with a friend of his. But then a whole lot of things happened, and long story short, he had to sell his share of the boat just before it got launched. And he got married and had children instead, but it was a dream that he spoke about often throughout my childhood.
And so you helped him realize his dream.
Well, in some ways, I did what he didn't do, and I also took him on a few sailboat deliveries when he was obviously a fair bit older than he intended to be when he first wanted to set off sailing, but it was nice to be able to spend that time with him on a sailboat.
So how did it feel, being with your father on a sailboat, giving him what he always loved?
It felt really good. He had sort of retired by then, so it was nice to be able to do something really fun, really cool, and see him really enjoying it and seeing him really happy that he was able to do an ocean crossing after all.
So you're sailing around the world. How do you prepare for a race like this?
Well, it's a long prep. It took me over 2 years to prepare, and it really started with choosing the right kind of boat within what was acceptable for the race and permitted by the race organizers. And then it was a question of getting the funds to buy the boat. And then it was a long process, almost 1.5 years, of refitting the boat, structurally reinforcing it, repairing it wherever it needed to be, and just making sure it was going to be up to the task of sailing 30,000 or more nautical miles nonstop.
What did you do specifically to the boat to get it ready for the race?
Well, we had to basically rebuild the top layer of the deck. We had to rebuild the bulwarks. We changed the old traditional wooden mast out for an aluminium mast, and then a whole lot of others jobs that we did. But those were sort of the key things that we did.
Mm-hmm. What piqued your interest about not only sailing around the world, but doing so without modern technology?
Well, that was actually one of the biggest attractions when this race was sort of reignited in 2018, is that it was a race without modern technology. And I've always been a bit of a dreamer and maybe sometimes longed to have come from a different generation where there was more exploration to be done. And I always wished that I'd been able to master the task of navigating with just a compass and a sextant. And this was the ideal opportunity to do it, because I can't really imagine under what other circumstances in this modern day and age you'd really be forced to just do it with a sextant.
Right. So one of your life ambitions was to make the natural journey, right?
Yeah, it was. And to be able to rely on the stars and on your instinct and read the weather and really be able to do it with as minimal outside help as possible.
And be your father's daughter.
I guess I was already my father's daughter, fortunately by then, but and maybe my undertaking of sailing in a race around the world was even bigger than he had envisaged. But yeah, I was pretty happy to be able to do it. Weather's not entirely stable. There's quite a bit of rain around, and the wind's quite shifty. But we're making good headway, and it's a good opportunity to catch some water. I've set up my rain catchment bucket, used about 30 litres in 25 days, I think it is now, maybe 32 litres. I filled one jerry can into the tank, so I'd like to catch enough water to fill that up again. And we're about 130 miles away from Cape Verds. Wind seems to be filling in now. Last night was another slow night, but I'm really enjoying myself. I'm enjoying the sailing, I'm enjoying the celestial navigation, I'm loving my solitude, I'm enjoying the tropical heat, the humidity. Yeah, it's good. It's all around good.
So what piqued your interest in, doing it alone?
Well, that's another thing. I've actually been a loner in some respects since childhood, in that I just enjoy doing things on my own. And the first time I went single-handed sailing, I really enjoyed the challenge of having to solve problems on your own, of having to sleep in such a way that you can be awake when you need to be, but that you can also rest and have that clarity of mind because you're well rested enough to make informed judgment calls. Seeing things through my own eyes without anyone with me in that moment to maybe project their own perspective of what they're seeing onto me.
Mm-hmm.
Some very trying conditions here. It's like being in the doldrums, except that we're not really in the latitude of the doldrums, but the wind's coming from all different directions. There are constant squalls. It's hard to set sail because the sails flog and then the wind changes direction. And there have been a lot of birds landing on board. At one point I had 7 birds, land birds, 3 different species. I don't know what they were, but unfortunately none of them stayed. I guess they all got blown out to sea. There's also a lot of insects, moths, dragonflies that are landing on board. And last night a very beautiful bird landed on board. I wish I could help it, but I don't really know what to do.
So Kirsten, what's an example of the problem that you had sailing and how you solved it without modern technology?
Well, one of the things, for example, it's quite simple, but is going up the mast when you're on your own. You can climb up the mast and secure yourself quite easily, but you've got to trust the boat in that moment and your self-steering gear to keep you on a relatively safe downwind course, because otherwise if it starts going upwind and into the swell, it's going to get very rough up on the mast. It's sometimes a question of how am I going to be on the stern and the bow or on the mast of the boat simultaneously. And usually you manage to do it by setting up a system of blocks and tackles so that you can control the tiller even while you're forward on the boat or something like that.
Did you get this the first time you used it, or how many times did you have to do it to feel comfortable out there in the open ocean?
I didn't get it the first time I did it, but yes, I've had to rig systems like that more than once in my life out at sea. So I think that's another interesting thing about this race. In some senses, it felt like it was the culmination of many experiences I've already made out at sea.
So we've got some real southern ocean conditions here. Fog, light rain, nice big rolling swell, which is pushing us along really nicely. The only thing is obviously the sun isn't visible, and I didn't manage to get the best of sun sights yesterday. And I'm just kind of starting my ascent northwards towards the Cape. So I'm hoping to get a few decent sights so that I can pinpoint my position more accurately than just running on dead reckoning right now. But anyway, it's all part of the challenge. After a bit of a frustrating night of the wind shift with a lull in between and relatively confused sea, we're moving along nicely again now.
So tell me, what tools and skills did you use out there specifically?
In terms of fixing the boat, I had, standard tools like wrenches and hammers and pliers and glues and, a drill and all that kind of thing, and a selection of nuts and bolts, which was a good part of having worked on the boat myself as much as I could, because I knew what tools I'd need to effectuate potential repairs. But then the skills that I needed and that I really mastered on the race were the skills of, observing the environment, of observing the clouds, of being able to, watch the barometer and have an informed understanding of what the weather's doing, how the wind is going to shift. And then other skills like constantly logging my direction and course and being able to use some dead reckoning to deduce my position, from which I could then use, a sight that I'd taken off the sun to calculate the position and ultimately get a position on the chart once a day.
You said that you'd taken off the sun. What do you mean?
So I mainly used the sun for navigating. So what I would do is I would take a sextant, and you measure the angle between the horizon and the sun, and you need very accurate time. And if you can get a relatively good angle and you've got accurate time, you can do a series of calculations and use nautical almanac to actually calculate a position based on your sun sights.
And what about celestial navigation? How did you learn to do that? I mean, is this steering by the stars, right? I mean, you see the Big Dipper and then Orion, and is that how you do it?
Yeah, pretty much. If you're taking your sights with the sextant at night, then you would use stars. And in the daytime, you'd use the sun. And I actually learned it many years ago. And I used to do it every now and again just for the fun and just to practice and compare to my GPS position and see if I was able to calculate a sort of semi-decent position. But I never had to rely on it and really, really feeling confident with it. That just took practice. And most of that practice I got on the race. So, yeah.
So how much of your day was spent actually doing things on the boat, and how much spent just by yourself looking at whatever you saw, the sea, the sky?
That's an interesting question, actually, that I haven't been asked before. But I think probably at least 50% of the time I was doing something like adjusting a sail or switching a sail out or taking a sight off the sun and calculating my position, or walking around the boat and checking that there wasn't anything that was chafing or broken. And if there was, then, doing whatever I needed to do to stop the issue or fix the issue. And then the rest of the time was doing normal stuff like getting some sleep, making food, eating. I did a lot of reading in my spare time, which was a real luxury, is that I had so much time to read. I wrote letters to people. So I would say at least 50% of the time I wasn't doing anything that was directly related to the sailing or the race, that was just related to keeping myself mentally and physically in good shape.
But you couldn't take many books. So did you have an iPad or something?
No, because we weren't allowed iPads or iPhones or Kindles or anything electronic. We weren't even allowed digital music. We were only allowed cassettes. So anything that existed in 1968, we were allowed, and
Oh,
otherwise.
my year.
So no, I just took lots of books with. I must have had about 100 books with me.
But you were on that boat and you're all alone. I mean, you're all alone by yourself for so many months. What was it like?
Mostly I was quite happy because I was enjoying the sailing, and I'd kind of think to myself every day how privileged I was to my sole task for the day just to be making the boat sail as fast as I could. But there were moments, and especially when it was tough, like because I was getting frustrated or with no wind, or, I was struggling with a certain kind of thing. That's when I really would have liked company. But it was okay. It was definitely only a small percentage of the time. And when I did have those very lonely moments, it helped me to read, because it was like escaping out of my little world, which consisted of the boat and the race, and reading someone else's thoughts, or escaping into a novel or a story, or even writing letters to people. It was a form of communication, and even though it wasn't instantaneous, it did help me while away those lonely moments.
So what books that you read spoke to you out there?
I've read some of my favorite sort of sailing novels, and one of them was written by a Frenchman called Bernard Moitessier, who was in the first race in 1968. And one of the reasons why it spoke to me is because he loved the ocean so much he didn't need company. He almost writes about the ocean as though it was another person. And then other books I read that did and have always left a bit of an impression on me are historical novels, where you can escape into a novel, and you've got characters like you would in a novel, but it's placed in an historical setting, so you're still learning something about the history.
So what did you learn about yourself?
I think what I learned about myself was, especially in the tough moments, that I could actually consciously tell myself to not be negative, to not let my thoughts get negative, because I had moments when I thought, this is so long. When am I going to get here? When am I going to arrive if I'm stuck without wind? Or how am I going to win this race if I'm not moving? Or how am I going to deal with this problem of barnacles growing on my hull and slowing me down? And it would be easy enough to get negative, especially when there was no one else to talk to and joke with or something like that. But I could actively say to myself, no, stop it, don't. Thinking negatively is not going to get you out of the situation.
Did you ever think of someone you wish had been with you to experience this with you?
I did think on a few occasions of my mother, because she's always been a pillar of support to me, that I could run ideas by, or if I was feeling a bit down, I could, give her a ring, and she'd usually have some words of wisdom to cheer me up. And I did definitely have moments where I would have liked to have spoken to her. And I also had moments that were absolutely just beautiful that I would have liked to have shared with someone like her.
So what did you do? You couldn't share them. You had to go inside.
Yeah, I couldn't. So I just think of the people that I would have liked to have shared moments with, and hoped that they might be thinking of me at the same time. Or the other thing that did really cheer me on a lot is that I knew that there were people following the race, and I knew there were people out there hoping and wishing for my success. So I didn't always feel that lonely. It felt like there were people cheering me on in the distance.
So you had 8 months of solitude. Then you won the race, and you're greeted by crowds and asked to do interviews and talk to strangers about their journey. That sounds like a big contrast. What was it like for you to go from solitude to being the center of press fury?
Yeah, it's a huge contrast indeed. But I think at the time I arrived, I was on such a good level. I was in such great spirits. It was such a novelty, such a nice novelty to see people again, that it just filled me up with a whole lot of joy. I just wanted to interact with the people. If the people wanted to interact with me and hear about my story, then I wanted to tell them about my story. And there were moments. What was harder actually was getting back into reading emails and answering phone calls and getting back into the technological side of things.
The technological side of our life. Yeah, that's right. You were alone on the boat. enjoying your solitude, but you weren't really alone, right? Because you had your boat, the Minnehaha.
Exactly. You're very
Tell us
right.
about that relationship with you and your boat.
Well, the boat, I felt like we were a team. So the boat wasn't just a boat to me. It was a living entity with a heart and a soul. And also it was carrying my life. So I had the hugest respect for the boat, and I guess I felt a sense of responsibility towards the boat. But it was like a companion, like a friend, a home, many things in one. But sometimes I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with the boat because the boat was a lot of work. Even before the race, I spent, many a night up until 2, 3 in the morning trying to solve a problem or just doing manual labor on the boat, or, getting gray hair, worrying about the boat and getting to the start line. So yeah, it's one of those things I have immense respect for. But there are days when I think, oh, gee, do I have to do this maintenance task again now? So yeah.
Did you ever talk to the boat?
I did. I did talk to the boat. For example, if I needed the boat to hold a good course for me while I had to go up onto the bow and do something, and hoping the boat wouldn't alter course and, put me on a rough angle to the seas, then I'd ask the boat very nicely. I'd say, please, just, you've got to hold this course for me now. I know it's not optimal with the way I have the sails set, but I have to go and do something up front there. And if the boat was doing really well, I'd praise the boat. I'd say, wow, you're an amazing boat. I can't believe you're getting these type of speeds and that you're surfing down the waves in the way that you are. So, yeah, I did talk to the boat.
What about sea creatures? What did you
Um,
see that left an impression on you? I mean, it's a long trip for a long time.
I saw sea creatures were very important to me because it was a reminder that there were other living entities out there. And the things I saw the most of were birds, seabirds, because there always seemed to be a bird around, at very least one or two. Sometimes there were many birds, sometimes they landed on the deck. I even had one fly down into the cabin one night because the light down below must have attracted it in. And they're not particularly scared. So if they land on the deck, you can sometimes just pick them up, like I did with the one that came down into the cabin. I just picked it up and I took it outside again. So those were always really special. But then dolphins always cheered me up. Whenever I saw a dolphin, it would make me happy. And I had a beautiful encounter with whales off the South African coast where I didn't have any wind all night, but the whales were surfacing right next to the boat. So close, I could almost have leaned over and touched them. And those were just wildlife experiences where you say, I'm so privileged to be seeing this right now.
And how large were the whales?
And they were big. They seemed like they were at least 2/3, if not 3/4, or even bigger than the boat's length itself. So they were huge creatures. And on the one hand, it was quite intimidating to see such massive animals so close to the boat. But then on the other hand, I knew they're peaceful creatures and there's no reason why they should want to do me any harm.
Did anything happen, any moment you remember with the whales or the dolphins or the seals that you will tell your grandchildren?
Well, the whale encounter was really special because they stayed with me all night. They just kept on surfacing around the boat for, what the remainder of the night, right up until it was daylight again. But one encounter that really does stand out is when I was on my way back up the Atlantic and I got becalmed in the doldrums. It was probably mentally the most challenging time for me because I was frustrated and I was starting to lose hope that I'd still be able to win the race. And there was nothing I could do. There was no wind, so I wasn't moving and I just had to be patient. But there was a group of about 5 dolphins and they came at least once a day and I could see it was the same dolphins because they had scars on them and I could recognize those marks.
Huh.
And it seemed to me like they were coming every day just to say hi. It's like, oh, you're still around. Well, we're still around as well. And, it just reminded me that although I was sitting in a frustrating position, not moving, I was still out in a very, very beautiful environment and that I just had to keep my eyes open and I'd still be seeing magical things like that. So, yeah.
Did you have names for them?
No, I didn't, but I talked to them as well. And I'd say, oh, little dolphins, you're back again. I can't believe you've come to say hello. And it's funny, I knew once I'd got north of the equator and the wind had set and I kind of knew I'm that I probably wouldn't see them again. The last day I saw them and the wind started filling in, I thought, I guess that's goodbye, little friends, because now I'm going to be on my way again.
Last night, as I left the photo gate, I had whales come up right next to the boat in the moonlight, in the calm. It was really beautiful. The only thing is now I'm becalmed and I'm not able to get away. Therefore, I'm experiencing all this beautiful marine life, and I get to see this beautiful coastline for a little bit longer. But now that I've left, now that I'm, so to say, on my way again after just waving at them briefly, I feel lonelier than I have during the whole trip.
There's more of my conversation with Kirsten Neuschäfer. That's coming up next. You're listening to American Voices. I'm Bill Bradley. Stay with us. I'm Bill Bradley, host of American Voices. We're back now with my guest, Kirsten Neuschäfer. She won an around-the-world sailing race without the use of modern technology. She used celestial navigation to win the Golden Globe race, not GPS. So, Kirsten, now that we know what you went through, did you prepare yourself physically or emotionally to be able to make a trip like this?
Not consciously. So I didn't consciously say, well, now I'm going to go running on the beach or whatever and get fit, or I'm going to, practice meditation so that I can deal with the loneliness. But I think my prep happened in a very natural way while I was preparing for the race. So mentally and emotionally, a huge part of that prep for me was having worked so much on the boat and having felt so confident that the boat was, that we'd cut no corners, that we'd done everything we needed to make sure the boat was as strong as it possibly could. I noticed then actually that I was building a lot of muscle that I didn't have before. So a lot of the physical and the mental prep happened naturally. But then two other big things I did was I sailed from Canada to South Africa, and then from South Africa back up to France. So I had two very long trips already on my own on the boat, which was also physical and mental preparation.
You mean before you went on the round-the-world journey?
Exactly. So I'd done at least 15,000 nautical miles already, even before I started the race, and also boosting my confidence.
I could imagine. So, Kirsten, your experience is so unique. There have got to be moments that you cherish. Did you ever feel a moment where you felt a certain transcendence to be out there in that space with this world that you were inhabiting?
I did. There were definitely moments when I felt so at home, so at one with the boat, so in harmony with the weather and the sea and the sailing and everything else, that it felt almost like it was my destiny to be out there. And those were, really happy moments. And then another really beautiful thing I saw, for example, and I didn't at first know what it was, but it was at night, and I got up at 2, 3 in the morning. It was definitely dark, and there's no reason there should have been light in the sky, but there was. The horizon was really lit up, and the light seemed to be moving, and I kept on staring at it and thinking, what is that? It can't be the dawn light, because it's still too early in the night for that to be happening. And then I realized it was the southern lights that I was looking at, and I'd never seen them before. And it was just one of those moments where I thought, well, this is why I chose to do one of these things, is because I wanted to explore and see and discover.
This morning I stuck my hand in the water, and the water was considerably warmer. And I've seen southern right whales this morning, a couple, maybe 3, and I saw a shark. I don't know what kind of shark, but I know a shark dorsal fin when I see one. It's a lively spot at any rate.
So, Kirsten, did you have any tips for the rest of us of wisdom you brought back?
I'm not sure. I guess one of the things I did obviously have low moments, mostly on the preparation to get to the start line, and there were moments when I thought to myself, this thing that that I want to do is such a big undertaking. I don't know if I'm able to do it. There were just so many aspects that I had to, there was the aspect of the boat, there was the financial aspect, there was the aspect of having to know how to do celestial navigation and 101 other things. And there were times when I thought this was too big for me.
Right.
And then if I narrowed it down to just a little thing, I'd say, okay, just get this task done. And then you can concentrate on the next thing. Stop thinking of the big picture. Stop thinking of the end destination and stop thinking of every little thing in one go that you need to do. Break it into bite-sized chunks and just see how you feel tomorrow once you've completed that task. And that was a huge thing for me, is to just take a thing a day at a time rather than how am I going to get to the end of it.
It's a good way, something to learn about life.
Yeah, I guess so, because I guess we get confronted with many things in life that just seem too big a challenge. And if you can break it into little bite-sized chunks, sometimes it's a surmountable thing.
So what you've accomplished shows really so much strength. I don't think most people could do this. And so when you look back on your upbringing, what do you think helped create the person who can sail around the world without a GPS, alone for months, and enjoy it?
I think there are multiple factors, but my parents were quite strict in that they wanted us to achieve. They wanted us to work hard at school, work hard at sports and all that kind of thing, live healthy lives. And I think as a child, sometimes it was frustrating, but looking back time and again in my life, I realized how that taught me to be self-disciplined. And that's been something that's stood me in very good stead throughout many things that I've done in my life. And then another thing I think that has played a big role is that I had a very outdoors kind of childhood. So I was enthused by sports, by outdoors from a very young age, and that it became a passion and that I wanted to pursue that passion. And I think that has been a big driving force in my life as well.
When you have returned from this journey, do you find it easier to relate to people or harder?
That's a very interesting question. I think maybe it depends on the people, of course. I think there are some things that I find hard to relate because they almost seem like abstract problems. For example, you have to absolutely be on time for a certain meeting or whatever, even though I know it's not an abstract problem. I know it's a way that we've structured our society and it's necessary. But then in other respects, I look at people and I feel like we've all got our struggles, and in many senses, the struggles out at sea can be a lot easier than the day-to-day struggles on land. So I think maybe I can understand or be a little bit more compassionate about things coming back to it and seeing it from a different perspective after having been removed from it.
Very interesting. And what do you think you learned out there that you'd like to see other people learn about their lives or nature or about the cosmos or whatever?
That's also a very interesting question. Well, for me, it was a huge inspiration to be out there. Many moments in the moment as well, not just looking back at it. So I'm always someone to encourage people to go out and enjoy just the natural beauty of things. Maybe sometimes instead of going to a gym, go for a run or a walk in a forest or on a beach or something like that, and see how much pleasure you can find with as little possible anything that you take with you, just to go out there and enjoy nature. And I guess it depends on people, but I've always felt some sort of solace within nature. It's also a comfort that I can go to, and I think that's what has made me enjoy the race so much, is that I was actually out there and where I wanted to be. So I would encourage people to do outdoors stuff and just nurture that respect for the outdoors and nature wherever they can.
Yeah, build that relationship between you and nature, right?
Yeah, you feel really grounded, attached to the earth, part of the earth, a child of the earth, if one can express it in some way like that, yeah.
Do you ever invite people on the boat?
I do. It's a bit of a mess at the moment because every time I need a tool, I have to dig under all sorts of settees and stuff to find the right tools. But I actually had a person who just randomly rocked up and has been helping me service my winches all day. So, it's nice to share it sometimes.
You ought to sell tickets to the boat that went around the world and meet the person who captained the boat.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's a good business idea.
Well, Kirsten, you have such a spirit of adventure and curiosity, and I know that people who have heard your story will be inspired to do brave things, just like you. Thank you for being on American Voices.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your interest and also your very kind words.
I've been speaking with Kirsten Neuschäfer, who won the Golden Globe race, an around-the-world sailing race without the use of modern technology. To find out more, visit kirstenggr.com and visit our Facebook page. It's American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley. And I'd love hearing from you. Write me, and we're also now on Instagram, so I hope you'll check us out there too. Follow us. Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.